Monica's still gonna be there. There she is.
Well, that's it for the Act 2 discussion. I believe that we have finally covered everything we needed to go over. And when you're ready to move on to the next lesson, finally prepare to make assets for your new DDLC mode. Thanks for tuning in.
Okay, so we're gonna need to like go back to the main menu to get rid of her. Actually, will even that do it? I don't know. I think it will. Yeah. The screens can override that. So we're just gonna start a new game. I would have like reloaded it to see the rest of what she had to say in that lesson, but like Monica would still be there. It would just put her right back, you know? Oh, let's see. That was Act 2 shenanigans, right? So we're on RPA extraction now.
The big moment has arrived, Hallie. After discussing many important topics, it is finally time to put our knowledge to the test. It's time to finally make a DDLC mod. After covering all the basics in my previous lectures, we're ready to examinate on what we have learned from them. And where do we begin? It's very simple. We need to access the contents of our Rpyc files. There are some programs that are capable of doing this. The outcome should always be that we see everything so that we're able to edit from them to create new mod assets. There are a variety of tools we can use. Let's take Rpyc tool, for example.
That's the one I use.
While it isn't designed for modding in mind, it's useful if you need to extract the Rpyc files from the game. After downloading the tool, extract the Rpyc tool file from the zip you downloaded to your mod's game folder. Run a command and it should extract. Another related tool is called Rpyc Extract by iWanPlays. It's an exe that you can also download into your mod's game folder. Personally, I prefer using that over Rpyc tool. It's only one step once you get the tool downloaded. Simply running it alone will do nothing, but if you drag an Rpyc file into the executable, that Rpyc file will be extracted. Once all RPAs are extracted, we're ready to move on. This lecture was pretty short, actually. All that was needed to do here was to get a tool used for Rpyc extraction and utilize it to extract Rpyc files in visual novels. Data miners. On the subject of extracting files, there's also a similar tool called Rpyc. Its main use is to convert Rpyc files into Rpy. The Rpyc files can usually be found in your mod's game folder, though you can also see them after extracting scripts.rpa with Rpyc tool or Rpyc extract. Please download Rpyc by clicking right here.
There it is. You can get it by clicking that.
I bet you're wondering what to do once you inject that into the game folder, whether it comes from the vanilla game or something else. Simply play the game for a bit, and then the Rpyc script files will show up in that game folder. That is, if the initial mod/game installation is correct and the Rpyc files were extracted beforehand. How do you know if you installed the mod correctly? Well, to refresh your memory, a proper mod installation consists of DDLC's Rpyc archive files being in the game folder. For example, let's talk about the mod you're playing right now. See how there weren't any issues putting it up first time? And how you have all of those files injected into the game folder? You're reading this now because, again, you installed this mod correctly. For any mod you download, there is at least a requirement to play them, and that is to ensure all of the DLC archive files from a mod's game folder are copied and pasted into the vanilla game folder. I like to copy-paste for the sake of being able to install it again if I were to accidentally miss this step. Though the same is true for Rpyc 7 compatible DDLC mods, there is an extra set of steps. You'd have to copy the lib and Rpyc folders that came with the Rpyc 7 compatible DDLC mod in question. Those folders are in its game folder. Don't need this apostrophe here for the possessive of its. Once copied, you paste them onto the vanilla game folder.
You were trying to say something, Natsuki, but it blinked away. Yes!
Great! Anyway, that's a wrap for this part. Next, we're going to create mod assets to use in our first mod. I shall walk you through everything you need to know about what you want to include in your mod. You'll also be taught all the rules and regulations that are enforced on mod asset usage as a whole. We can get started whenever you're ready to continue. Until then, thanks for listening. I appreciate it.
There we go. What she didn't tell you about the Rpyc files is that those are the files that, well, they're basically the scripts that the game itself is reading, and Rpyc will automatically convert your Rpyc files into Rpyc files whenever you launch the game. It's actually a requirement for the game to launch that it can convert those files, and if it can't, there's something wrong in your script, you gotta fix it. And the reason Rpyc files exist is so that you can release those as your game, so that your scripts are protected by their encryption, basically. But if you've got the unrpyc file, like she told you to download, the encryption kind of doesn't matter much. It's just, lots keeping honest people honest, that kind of thing. Custom assets.
Hey, Hallie. Guess what? I've been doing some thinking lately. We've learned a lot over the course of this tutorial. We've learned how to install DDLC and found a stable mod template to use. We learned how to extract the files and install mods. We learned the functions of every Rpy file. We learned how to create labels and its contents. We learned how to create choices. We learned the basics of text tags and arguments. We learned about audio. We learned about character sprites and transformations. We learned about the basics of CGs. We learned about persistent playthroughs. We learned about glitching the game. And finally, we learned how to extract RPA files. Do you know what this means? It's time to put our knowledge to the test and create our very first mod. Honestly, the thought of getting this far is very satisfying. Now that we're in this phase of our modding course, it's time for me to teach you how you can create your own mod assets. We're also going to use assets that already exist and credit the appropriate author for their work being used in your project. This applies to backgrounds, character graphics, sprites, audio, and free-to-use text stuff. Let's start off with the backgrounds. First, we need to know how to define one. The definitions for the backgrounds can be found in Definitions RPY. They are located under the audio definitions. Defining a background consists of the following, for example. Image BG, Class A, PNG. Since we're either creating a new background or finding one in the DDLC community drive, the definition should use the following code. Image BG, mod assets, name, PNG. Usually the backgrounds are PNG files. Although according to the official Rpyc documentation, you can also use WebP or JPEG for your images. GIF files with no animation and BMP files are supported too, but I strongly recommend that you don't use these file formats. Only use PNG, WebP, or JPEG. And in case you're wondering what dimensions you need for a background, it is 1280 pixels in width and 720 pixels in height. So you need to make a background with a 1280 by 720 canvas. If you make a background that is too small, then you'll see a gray checkerboard revealing what's behind the backgrounds. And if you make a background that is too big, then some parts of the background will be cut off. The dimensions have to be just right. Besides, DDLC uses the dimensions of 1280 by 720 by default. Therefore, it's best to only make backgrounds with these dimensions. The same applies with CGs. Speaking of CGs, creating and defining one can be a bit tedious. You can once again take a look at the inner workings of the game's CGs by opening CG's RPY with your compatible text editor. The first part is simple. Draw your base and then add as many expressions you see fit on separate layers. Don't forget to save the expressions you drew separately from the base. The base itself should have its own image, by the way. Once you're done drawing, we'll go to the hard part. That challenging part in question is defining them correctly. We can find the definitions and inner workings of CGs in CG's RPY. Looking exactly like how they're defined for the most part, you should first define the base on the CG you made as an image. Then you have to define the expressions made specifically for that base CG you created. They have to be defined in a way so that the expression is visible in front of the base. I personally haven't tried defining custom CGs myself, so you might as well figure that out via trial and error. Sorry in advance.
What a good tutorial.
Next, we'll insert some audio to use for our mods. First, let's obtain some audio. You'd have to pick out some audio that are publicly available. Or you can create your own audio in any way you want. Defining audio is different compared to defining images. It's quite straightforward. Simply put the following code as an example. Define audio example equals mod assets example aug. Obviously, if you were to leave it like that, you'd get an error because such file doesn't exist. To fix this, replace example with the audio you want to use. You might be wondering what's up with the different audio channels being used. We're actually going to go over that topic right now, so please listen carefully. There are 3 channels of audio that Rpyc uses by default. They are music, sound, and voice. These support the most basic tasks such as playing and queuing audio. However, they only play back one audio file at any given time. From what I can gather, music is basically a piece of background music, sound is for the sound effects, and voice is for voice acting. In DDLC, there are absolutely no press skins of voice actors in normal gameplay aside from the endings and secrets. Because there's no voice actors, there isn't a point to have a voice channel in DDLC, so we only use music and sound.
But it is a mod, and you could get voice actors if you really wanted.
If you're making a mod that does have voice acting,
Oh, there you go.
you can go into Options RPY and set the Define Config has voice variable to true. By default, it is set to be false. For more about audio and their functions, visit this webpage.
Is there another link? This webpage. We're not going to see it.
Now then, the last thing we need to discuss is how to define new sprites and composites. Sprites are one of the most fundamental elements in any game. They are used as heads-up display stuff and two-dimensional game things such as tiles, platforming objects, and items, etc. In this case, sprites in DDLC make up of 3 parts: the left body piece, the right body piece, and the head. I would know, I'm just a composite sprite myself after all. Pretty cool, huh? Anyway, the method of defining sprites is different in its own way.
There was another unnecessary apostrophe in that it's...
Defining a character sprite goes along like this, for example. Image Sayori 1A equals composite 960-960-00 Sayori 1L 00 Sayori 1R 00 Sayori A PNG. As I said a while before, if you add B in between the pose number and the expression letter, you will get that character's casual outfit. This applies to everyone except Monica. With the power of modding, we can remedy that by giving Monica a casual outfit. Look into the DDMC community drive in order to find the perfect casual outfit for Monica. It can be some kind of dress, some street clothes, whatever you fancy. If you found one, great. If you found a headpiece already on there, you should delete that head part. As in, select what you want to cut and part of the picture will be taken away and into your clipboard. In order to do that, we need to open up a program capable of drawing up to multiple layers at once. The least you can get is a program called Pt.9. It's free to use software and all we'll need for novice artists. You can also download and use other programs such as GIMP, Adobe Illustrator, Adobe Photoshop, Rpyc, etc. You should not use basic drawing software such as MS Paint because you can't work with multiple layers and transparency will be lost if you save a picture with it. Plus, drawing with MS Paint is extremely tedious and it's very restrictive. Once you have a compatible drawing program running, you should paste in one of Monica's default heads. Select only the head with the rectangular selection tool. Where the head ends is where the selection should stop. Make sure you get every pixel of her head and nothing else. Now cut it! Paste the head onto the casual Monica you obtained. Make sure you do this without creating a new layer. Now cut the head off again. Congratulations, you now have a headless Monica wearing a casual outfit. Rinse and repeat for the other poses. Then do it again for Monica's leaning pose if the casual outfit you picked out has that pose included. If not, don't worry about it. We usually don't see Monica lean very often anyway. Now that you have a casual set of clothes for Monica, you're gonna want to save them inside of the Mod Assets folder somewhere. I prefer making a folder for each Doki to include just custom stuff you either made for yourself or found on the community asset drive. For example, save those clothes for Monica in Mod Assets/Monica. You should actually create those folders first before saving the clothes you got for Monica. And now comes the tedious part. Defining your assets! Creating definitions for new assets is never fun to do. For adding a casual outfit for Monica, the process of defining the new clothes in this situation is not a big issue. However, if you do create more outfits for any Doki you like, it is important that you give the files a name that's easy to remember. And you should put assets for each Doki in their respective folders inside Mod Assets. Check out the definitions for Monica in Definitions RPY and copy the entire definition table for her. Paste the entire table under the original and start adding B in between the pose number and the expression. For example, start with 1BA and work your way down from there. Replace the default uniform sprites in the definition with the casual outfit that Monica will be given by you. For instance, follow this format. Image Monica 1BA equals composite 960-960-00 Mod Assets Monica 1BL 00 Mod Assets Monica 1BR 00 Monica A. Did you get all that? Great! Edit your definitions with this format in mind. When defined correctly, you should see Monica wearing the casual outfit you picked out for her in-game. If not, there's something wrong with your code.
Or something wrong with the name of your files. Because, like, the way she set it up here, we assumed that Monica1PL and Monica1PR are the sides of her casual outfit that we use. Like, this would be the left half of her body with the arm in one pose, and this would be the right half of her body with the arm in another pose. But if you didn't name the files 1PL and 1PR, it wouldn't know what it's looking for, and you would get an error.
I know how you accidentally make things incorrect. Just be careful with coding as a whole and you'll be fine. And with that, you successfully learned how to create, add, and define assets for your mod. We just need to do one more thing. If the custom assets you provided are your own, you can simply acknowledge that fact in a separate document. But if you provide custom assets that other people made, it is strictly important that you credit them for the amount of sweat they put into their hard work and stuff. In other words, don't claim stuff from the community asset drive as your own. Give credit to the appropriate people who created which assets that you were using to create your mod. Claiming stuff as your own in that case is like stealing candy from a baby. And you should know not to steal anything. Giving credit is simple for the most part. The hard part is finding the individual who created the assets in question. Once you find the assets you downloaded, there should be a name of the person who created them. Write that name down somewhere so you don't forget to add it into the credits. Well, that's pretty much it for creating mod assets and crediting people for the assets that already exist. I hope you got everything plugged into your memory banks. Go and study what you learned throughout this course because coming up next you'll be quizzed on this. When you think you're done studying, advance to the next part. I'll be waiting.
Oh boy, goodness. So, wait, almost done there? We did the custom asset. It's time for reflection, I guess?
Hey, Hallie. It's time for you to take an exam on this course. I noticed you have completed your first mod.
No, well, I mean, I did technically complete Interview Club.
Before you decide to build your mod and release it for the world to see, you will first show me how much you know about DDLC modding as a whole, and I will grade you based on your effort and performance on this test. If you get at least the majority of the questions correct, you will pass the course and move on to the last step. Do you understand?
I don't understand.
Really? Maybe if I word that in a way you'd understand.